Hello everybody, this is Refresh and I'm here to discuss my Marvel Superheroes pre-release for Magic the Gathering that I attended at Emerald Knights Comics Games in Burbank, California. I was a little hesitant to go to this one after the debacle that was Spider-Man, but Wizards proved that they can still make decent sets after all, and so with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles making me feel better about Universes Beyond sets not being total trash, I decided to go and check out Marvel Superheroes. I am a Marvel fan, and so there is some incentive for me to be interested in this, even if I don't like all the universes mixing together up in standard and other constructed formats, so I don't play constructed anymore. But in limited, it's just Marvel characters fighting against Marvel characters, and I'm okay with that. So you get the pre-release kit here with Protect, Defend, Assemble. The store and Wizards didn't really provide anything else out of the ordinary pre-release experience, which is just a sealed deck tournament. And so there's not much else to talk about when it comes to the experience of going to pre-release, except doing a tournament. And the turnout was surprisingly low. Usually Emerald Knights is pretty full in terms of their capacity, but it was actually maybe like a half the usual turnout for the first night of pre-release, and that's quite surprising, although the cost of the set is probably fueling that to some extent. Maybe the burnout from the community with the number of sets being released and the Universes Beyond being a little too much. But, you know, as a Marvel fan, I guess I'm okay with going to this one, and probably one pre-release for every set anyways. And then if you look on the inside, you have some generic tokens and counters, as well as some artwork on the inside of here, which, you know, looks kind of fun. If you're a Marvel fan, that is. And then you have a deck box on the inside with more artwork that mirrors the artwork here. If you open it up, inside you will get a spin down counter using the new black die with color matching one of the 5 colors of Magic. Spin down counters, and here you have the M on the 20 and the Planeswalker symbol on the 1. I don't like this design because it is a little confusing where the 1 is, and typically the Planeswalker symbol was on the 20, and so you get a little confused sometimes when you look at this, but it's still a decent die and it's easy to read. You got one promo card. As of the last few sets, they got rid of the promo stamp, and so now it's just a generic foil card. In this case, I got Avengers Under Siege. You get a pre-release deck building tip sheet, as well as just some information on what else you can buy from the set, which is obviously not terribly exciting. It's not very lore worthy, whatever. You have one pretty generic Planeswalker card divider, which has some comic stuff on the back, but you know, this is not terribly exciting. And then you have 6 packs of Magic, which I opened, and this is what I opened here. I'm gonna lay out everything that I opened and show you what I got. Alright, so here are all the cards that I opened. As you can see, in terms of colors, green had the most, followed by black, then red, then blue, then white. And so there is an incentive to play the colors that I have the most cards of. But despite having the most number of cards, there were a lot of medium to only sideboard cards in green. And there was nothing of real power and potency in green. Especially if you look at the multicolor cards that I opened, only Absorbing Man, and I guess you could say Titania, is green. And in green, there weren't any like powerful rares for me to be excited about. And so I kind of ruled out green because power level was not consistent with the amount of cards that it had. And then I looked at everything else. And if you take a look at what else I opened, then there are 2 clear color pairs that open up here. There is red and black and white and blue. And red and black is probably going to be the stronger of the 2, because if you look at it, there is a lot of villain synergy going on between the Madam Hydra and the Madam Mask and the Avengers Under Siege, as well as the Ruinous Wrecking Crew and the Thunderbolts Conspiracy, making it a very strong potential deck. And then blue and white is obviously going to be the weaker of the 2 because it's the most shallow card pool. As you can see, I have the least cards of those colors. But in blue and white, you get King T'Challa and Captain America Living Legend, and I even got Captain America's Shield. And so the spike in me said, I gotta build a red and black deck, because that is going to be the stronger deck of the 2. Just because the synergies, the card pool was a lot wider, and the bombs were overall stronger. And I could even play Captain America's Shield in that deck. But, here's the thing. I am a Marvel fan. I've been reading the comics since I was little, and so I ended up leaning towards a blue and white deck because I wanted to play King T'Challa. I wanted Captain America to have his shield. So I was going to see if I could make that work. But first I'm going to show you what a black and red deck would have looked like, and to see the power that I gave up because I am a fanboy. Look at this deck. This pool is pretty strong. Like, the synergy between all the villains, the Ruinous Wrecking Crew, the Madam Hydra, the Madam Mask, and the ability to get back the dead villains with Unliving Legionnaire, as well as Avengers Under Siege blowing everything up, Thunderbolt's Conspiracy, bringing all my many villains back to life for a second round. It's a really strong deck. Obviously, there would need to be some cuts made, but nothing about this deck excited me because, as a Marvel fan, I don't really care about villains that much. I like the heroes. And yeah, there are a couple here in Speed and Human Torch, but what I really wanted was to play T'Challa. So, despite that this is probably the stronger deck from the sealed pool that I opened, I had to go white-blue. So here's the final deck. I had to play pretty much every blue and white card that I had, minus a few completely insignificant ones that really didn't do much for the deck. And it actually turned out to be a reasonably good curve. You know, there's 3s in the middle, and then a few 4s, and then just a little bit on the ends, and it's fairly low mana overall. I still ended up putting 17 lands in the deck because I wasn't certain if I was going to be able to hit my 4th land drop, and I had some power up for the Ultron drone, for example, that I wanted to be able to hit. And so maybe I should have gone to 16 lands because of the somewhat more aggressive form of the curve, but I don't have a lot of 2s, and so I wanted to make sure I also hit the 3s and was able to get them off. And so I stayed with 17 lands, and with the Surveillance Room and the Fist Tower and one more swamp for the second black source for Too Evil to Stay Dead, on top of the basic land cycling from the AIM Scientist and the Burrow backup, I thought that that was going to be fine, and then 7 plains and 7 islands on top of that. Is the black and red deck better? Yes, and you can see that. But this way I got to play King T'Challa, I got to play Captain America's shield with Captain America, and that was enough. I have a little bit of removal in the Frozen in Ice and the 2 Strict Tricksters stratagems. And then I wanted to be able to trigger the Atlantean Cavalry's second card ability, as well as some of the prowess abilities of the Kree Commandos and the Agent of Atlas. And so I put in a few extra card draw effects like the Futures Forge and the Pym Particles. I didn't want to have the second Futures Forge in here because it's a lot of mana in a deck that can't do a lot. Also, the Trickster Stratagem also triggers the second card effect, as well as prowess. And so I think all of that worked together pretty well. King T'Challa is obviously the bomb of the deck, although he is subject to certain kinds of removal. And there is a surprising amount of synergy between the prowess and draw card effects that I have. And so it felt okay. Obviously the red and black villains deck is better, but this is fine. So I sleeved this up and took it to the games. Alright, so let's talk about the games I played. In my first match, I was up against a Mirror, another blue-white deck, and in the first game, my opponent got mana screwed, and that pretty much sealed the deal. I mean, I had Cap's Shield and Spider-Woman to lock down his only cards that mattered, and he couldn't play enough cards to keep up, and so I just steamrolled over him for the win there. In the second match, which I forgot to take a picture of somehow, I ended up winning because I got Black Panther out, although he got exiled pretty quickly with the Flash enchantment that exiles the tapped creature. But I also ended up with Cap's Shield, and eventually the Cap's Shield ended up taking the victory for me because my opponent just couldn't effectively block my creatures as they were attacking. And so I got the win there. In my second match, I was up against a player that was playing a full-on Jeskai build, so white, blue, and red, and somehow they had all of the card draw, and Lady Thor, and Daredevil, and I just could not overcome all the blinking shenanigans, the card drawing off the top of their deck shenanigans, and it was just too much value for me in the first game. So I was destroyed there, and then in the second match, I had to mulligan to 5 because I had a off-color lander and then a no-lander. And so on the 5 mulligan, I was on the play, and I ended up flooding out very quickly. All I do were lands, and there's not much I could do. So my opponent buried me pretty quickly with Lady Thor and Daredevil again. And so that was that. It was a clean sweep 0-2 with lots of time left over. Then I went to the third match, and this was the big one. We went all the way to the third game. My opponent was playing a Esper deck, I believe. I think just splashing the white for some strong effects there. But it was mostly a villains deck, and in the first game, my opponent had me down to a really tough spot. My opponent had way many more resources and turned the tables on me eventually, smashing me down with their creatures. But the thing that I managed to do is take them down to a really low life total. And they went shields down at one point and had one flying blocker for my team. And I managed to remove that blocker and get in for the win at the last moment. I think if I'd waited one more turn, I would have been defeated. In the second game, my opponent was on the play again. And this time, my opponent managed to get the win with the Scientist Supreme teaming up with a flying Viv Vision and getting some card draw. And even though I had some pretty good cards, a lot of them are neutralized, and my opponent got the win that way. And then in the final match, we were on rounds, and so I was able to score a 1-2-3 mana curve playing on each turn, and that put me on a strong advantage. I had my opponent down to 6 in the final round before we would have tied, and my opponent gave me the concession because if the game would have kept going with the removal that I threw on their only blockers, they were just going to lose in the following turn that it came back to me anyways. And so they generously conceded instead of leaving us at a draw. So I went 2-1 this time around. So how do I feel about Marvel superheroes? Well, I like Marvel. And as much as I don't like what Universes Beyond does to Magic, I like Marvel enough that this set, which feels better than the Spider-Man set, was a good amount of fun. I mean, I had fun in the pre-release. I had fun making the kinds of decisions that I never normally would because of how much this property, as a longtime comic book reader and sometimes movie watcher, means to me in terms of my enjoyment. And so I enjoyed playing this in what is just a sealed tournament. I made irrational decisions like playing a weaker blue-white deck instead of the stronger red-black deck, and I think if I were going to play this on Arena, I probably would make similar terrible decisions as well, because that is what happens to somebody who was and is a longtime fan. As for the sealed deck experience, I mean, it was fine. I think that there are some archetypes that are better for sealed deck and some archetypes that are worse. Obviously, if you're trying to play something that relies on having a mass of a certain type of card like villains, that's just going to be dependent on whether or not your pool opens that up, and it can be a little bit fragile, but I think that the design is robust enough that you can still get some decent decks built out while not worrying too much about synergy. And so that makes playing the set about as fun as just any other Magic set, except that if you like Marvel, then a lot of these characters and some of the cards that, you know, evoke the themes and the stories in the Marvel history are going to matter for you a bit more. I don't like the price point, and I don't like that the pre-release, even with the price point and the hype about these Universes Beyond experiences, is still just a sealed deck tournament with nothing else added. There's no goals that you're trying to accomplish. There's no special prize. There's no, you got to play Avengers versus the Masters of Evil or something like that. It's just a sealed deck tournament. And, you know, that's not terribly fun. I always wish that these pre-release experiences can be a little bit more. And they do have, like, other special rules that they design for some of their other events. And so it's a bit surprising that we don't get something like that for pre-release. And it doesn't have to be much. It could just be like, hey, you know, your team this or the team that. Whichever team makes the most wins gets a special promo card, which can be totally common. And I'm okay with that, you know. But Wizards doesn't want to do anything like that. And so we just get a plain old sealed deck tournament, which is okay and acceptable, but nothing exciting. For Emerald Knight's part, they don't give extra prizes except for 2 packs of whatever set that you're in. And I like that in the sense that there's no pressure for you to try to win more, and nobody's going to get too salty for losing except if, you know, they're just a naturally salty person. And so that's nice. I like the low stakes playing environment. And these are the packs that I got. And that was my experience at the Marvel Superheroes pre-release. How did your pre-release go? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of my videos, you can hit subscribe. This is Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.